This session kicks off our live webinar series this week. We would love for you to join us for our other webinars. We've got some great stuff in store for you guys. You can find that schedule at live.hydrodyne.com. This session is titled, Who is Hydro-Dyne? How our superior technology can optimize your Headworks performance. Our technology consists of fine screens, coarse screens, screenings handling, and grit removal equipment. The key word here is optimize. We're going to be talking about that a lot today. As a custom manufacturer, we're here to optimize your Headworks performance. My name is Neil Robinson. I am the East Region Sales Manager here at Hydro-Dyne, and I'll be your speaker today. This is a picture of me that's a little dated. I've got a lot more gray hair now. The good news is I have since given this shirt to Goodwill. This is kind of a testament to the fact that retailers put shirts like this on clearance for a reason. The perfect joke, I just thought of this earlier as it was too late. The perfect joke would have been for my sidekick over here, Randy Dow, that he's monitoring the questions that you're going to send in later. If we only could have had this shirt for Randy to wear, and we could have panned over to Randy, but it's too late. I actually did give this shirt to Goodwill. So anyway, enough about that. So let's look at what we're going to talk about here today. The following 5 topics. First is, who is Hydro-Dyne Engineering? What are our advantages to you? Secondly, we'll spend a good deal of time on our products overview with some case studies. We'll touch upon controls and service. That'll take about the first 25 to 30 minutes of our presentation today. Number 5 is Q&A, and that's where Randy comes in. We've got a live Ask a Question feature on Zoom right now. Feel free to email and to ask questions at any time. Randy might actually answer some of those questions real time, or we'll save those questions to the end and have a Q&A session at the end. We also have a brief survey that we'd like you to fill out at the end around the time that we do the Q&A. The survey helps us, as always, with our Headworks and presentations like this to not only meet but also exceed your expectations. So let's get started here. A little brief history of Hydro-Dyne Engineering. We've been around for over 40 years with water and waste screening experience. Started back in 1978 when the company was founded. 1984, our first through flow screen. 88 was our first center flow screen. 2001 was a big deal because our current owner took over the company at that time. Still our owner today, so he's owned Hydro-Dyne for almost 20 years already. 2011, you see the little acronym SCR, that stands for Screenings Capture Ratio. We sent the center flow screen over to England to an independent organization to certify the screening capture. Our center flow set the records for screening capture in terms of how much screenings it could capture, which was 93% for the 2 millimeter grid, 84% for the 6 millimeter grid. 2017, we became ISO 9001 certified, which is pretty unique for our industry. 2019, our center flow received approval for membrane pre-screening. And just this year, 2020, we've launched our next generation washing compactor. So I mentioned my friend Randy over here, our sales director. When he saw this slide last week, he said that we have 4 decades of screening experience. And I'd like to argue that we've been making screens for 6 decades. So we'll touch on that here at the Q&A session. You're welcome to send Randy a chat message if you know what I'm talking about with 6 decades. The Hydro-Dyne advantage, you can see as this slide transitions that there's quite a few advantages actually to dealing with Hydro-Dyne. First and foremost, we're headquartered right here in Clearwater, Florida. made in the USA, everything right here under one roof, 110,000 square feet. We like to say complete control from start to finish. The question is, what does that really mean? It means from the moment you call me as your regional sales manager and we start the lead and we start the project until the time that that screen actually ships out the back door over here, the whole thing takes place within this one factory under one roof. Nothing is outsourced. There's no engineers off site. We're all here together under one roof. So complete control from start to finish. We think that's important. Continuous improvement. We've been making screens for over 40 years now. Every screen along the way, we're trying to do better and better. Independently certified, we already mentioned that. Exceptional quality, service, and reliability. We hang our hats on that. And more than 2,000 installations worldwide. So I'd like to pause real quick. Right, this one slide is kind of a micro summary of this whole presentation. Made in the US, complete control, start to finish, high capture, high quality, excellent service, excellent reliability. So we've got a family of screens here, as we like to call it. 3 altogether. We've got the Great White Center Flow, which is the high capture that we talked about going over to Europe. The Bull Shark Through Flow, which is versatile in that it's a fine screen, but also a coarse screen. So in fact, it's a little more versatile than the Center Flow. And then the Tiger Shark Multi-Rake screen, which is definitely our coarse screen option for those applications. But the thing here is this concept of a Hydro-Dyne screen family. What do we mean by that? They're all pretty different style screens, center flow, through flow, multi-rake, but they've got a lot in common. The design features of how the screens are actually designed and the componentry that we use to make the screens, such as the drive system, I'll point that out here in a minute, and the guide link system. So the guide link is a little difficult to explain, so I've got one here to show you. A Hydro-Dyne screen, any screen in our family, doesn't contain a chain. There's no chains in a Hydro-Dyne screen. They're all a guide link system. So here's the guide link, ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene. We, believe it or not, make this part in-house, just like everything else. And here is the rail, which is integral to the screen's frame that the guide link fits into. Stainless steel construction. So this stainless steel is pickled and passivated in-house as well. So I'll show you this a little more as we progress, but here is the guide link system that we have so that we don't have chains to use like others might. Last but not least, we have no submerged wheels, bearings, or sprockets down in the channel amongst any of the screens, and I'll point that out as well. Okay, I was just telling Randy here, this is one of my favorite slides. There's a lot to talk about here. This is the Great White Center Flow screen. First off, if you don't remember anything else, look at the orientation of the screen, the placement of it. It's rotated 90 degrees in the channel compared to a traditional screen. It's also sitting in the channel at a 90-degree installation, so it's always a perfectly vertical screen. It's a continuous band screen. Some people call it an elongated drum screen. That's okay, but the thing about the center flow is it's a much smaller footprint than a drum screen. So there's a couple things we're doing here by this orientation. One is we're allowing the influent flow to go directly into the center of the screen. It hits the back plate, which doubles as our bypass gate, and then it goes out both sides. The water flows out either side of the screen. So we've doubled up the screening surface on the center flow screen. That gives us high capacity, low head loss. They go hand in hand, high capacity, low head loss. As I just mentioned about our family of screens, there is no maintenance below the top of the channel. It's all open in there, whether it's the center flow, the through flow, or the multi-rake. It's all open, and all of the maintenance that the operator does do is above grade at the top of the channel. So there's nothing down in the channel, which is common to our family of screens. I had to think for a second. What I want to mention to you guys here, the center flow has a lot of layout options. Going back to this theme of us being a custom manufacturer, optimizing your headworks, there's a lot of things you can do with the center flow. Center flow doesn't care where the influent and the effluent side of the screen is. We can have the discharge come out the front side, on the effluent side, or on the back side. Likewise, we can put the screening's compactor, integral to the screen as we call it, inside the screen, or we can put it external to the screen sitting over here on the side of the channel. So there's a lot of layout options when it comes to the center flow. Last thing to mention, this is pretty unique. Let's assume that this channel width is 48 wide. I'm just making that up, a 48-inch wide channel. We can make the screen deeper, wider if you will, than 48. Because of the way the screen's rotated in the channel, we can just make the screen go deeper down the channel and do, let's say, a 54 or a 60-inch deep screen. Very unique. You're not going to do that on any other type of screen. This is pretty cool. We've actually got a video of a screen in service. This is Romeoville, Illinois. Some people can't believe that the screen is actually cleaning as well as it is, as you'll see. So the dirty side and the clean side. A lot to point out here. You can see the teeth, kind of the shark teeth on the screen. Since it's a great white center flow screen, you see the teeth of the screen that help take up the larger objects, the rags, the wipes, and stuff like that. But overall, you can see just the capture that this screen is achieving. It's pretty remarkable. The belt goes up to the top of the screen where we have two spray bars that spray through the grid to clean the screen off like that. Very impressive to see how well our screens clean. So let's look at what some of the applications are for the Great White, for the center flow. Hopefully you can kind of get a feel by now. Fine screening. That's where we want to put a center flow screen, is in a application where we have an MBR or an IFAS or otherwise a high capture expectation for a screen. That can be traditional headworks, a traditional wastewater treatment plant. We can have water intake, such as a seawater intake or a river intake. We can also do a whole host of industrial applications. So the next slide is going to be a case study, but this happens to be a photo from that same slide. So this is Canton, Ohio. It's an MBR facility. What I want you to see, since this is such a large photo, is the sluice system. That's one of the largest sluice systems that we've done. So you've got all the redundancy that's required in an MBR plant. You've got all this whole host of center flow screens that all feed this pretty cool sluice system that then feeds the compactors later. So let's look at that. Center flow screens deliver immediate results at the largest MBR facility in North America. Like I said, Canton, Ohio. Being an MBR, they needed to get the screenings down to no larger than 2 millimeters, which we've done here with the center flows. I'll contradict myself a little bit here because it's a little unique, but there are actually 3 coarse center flow screens in Canton. So we don't see that often, to use the center flow as a coarse screen, but it's only a 4 millimeter screen. So it's a pretty fine coarse screen, if you will. And then there's 6 fine screens, which are 2 millimeter per plate. So a total of 9 center flows in Canton, Ohio. Because of all that, they're removing quite a bit of material. They've told us they remove about 6 cubic yards of material per day in Canton. So let's move on. We're moving quickly here. Let's talk about the bull shark, which is the second screen in our screening family. So what we get with the bull shark is a little more versatility. When the screen's kind of set back on an angle like that, which is typically 75 degrees for us, we can pull out larger objects, The larger stuff sits on the grid better with the angle of incline for that screen. So anytime we're looking at larger solids, such as maybe a prison application or septic receiving, or just a good coarse screen in a multitude of coarse applications, then maybe we're going to lean toward the through flow bull shark rather than the center flow. Nice thing about the bull shark is we can get it into narrower channels. We can go down to an 11-inch wide or an 11-inch narrow channel, if you will, for a bull shark screen. We need 30 inches on the center flow so that the water on the center flow can get outside the screen. Another cool thing about the bull shark, you can see this little A-frame here, hopefully, that supports the screen. We can use that A-frame as a pivot to pivot the screen up out of the channel. What do you pivot for? It's not for maintenance. Like I said, there's, again, on the bull shark, there's nothing to maintain in the channel. There's no sprockets, no chains. We just have the guide link that I showed you earlier. What you do pivot for is simply for inspection or for bypass. So you're really not going to need to pivot the bull shark screen that often. A little bit about the theory of operation quickly. The animation kind of has this going around continuously. What we like to do with our screens is have them actually sit still. We don't want that grid moving. Let all the solids and all the screenings kind of build up a dam on the front of the screen. That material is preventing other material from getting through. As that's happening, the water level's rising in front of the screen. That kicks on either a float switch or an ultrasonic sensor, which then starts the screen in motion. And it just does that intermittently all day long, an on and off cycle to achieve the highest capture that we can. A little bit different from the center flow. I mentioned the center flow has a lot of different layout options. When you get into more of a traditional screen like the through flow or the multi-rake, now we're more or less limited to having the screenings and the washing compactor on the back side of the screen. Not a big deal. Most people are used to that, but we have a little more flexibility for layout with the center flow. Should mention down here at the bottom, we would love for you to ask more questions. I know I'm going kind of quickly here. You can email us, info@hydrodyne.com with a dash between the hydro and the dyne. So feel free to email us. Hopefully Randy's getting some questions through our Ask a Question on Zoom. So go ahead and ask us questions. And of course, you can go to our website as well, hydrodyne.com. Lots of information there. We have our phone number. We'd love for you to contact us. Real quickly, again, we have a spray bar in the top of the screen to spray off, literally spray off the screenings like we had on the center flow. Bull shark applications. A lot of the same applications that we just looked at on the center flow, but we want to emphasize coarser applications, if you will. The pump station, the CSO. This is Slidell, Louisiana. Look at that. You can't get a more coarse application than that. There's limbs, there's trash, there's even a board sticking out of there. So the bull shark is kind of synonymous, even with its name, for kind of these tough applications. In addition, however, we put bull sharks in the Headworks all the time, and I'll explain how we do that here in a minute. Here is our quick case study for the through flow. This was a screen that helped improve screening and thereby ease maintenance challenges in Tulsa, Oklahoma. In Tulsa, they had some climber screens. And I think of a climber screen as being a single rake, multi-rake, if you will. The ones in Tulsa weren't even in operation. I'm pretty sure they had broken down and were no longer operable. So that's the climber screens. We got the new Hydro-Dyne screens at the bottom that feed a sluice to take the screenings away. One thing I like to point out about Tulsa is look at the height of the screens. There's a gray line kind of dividing the old yellow climber screens, and down here, our Hydro-Dyne screens are well below the line. Not sure you can see it on your computer screen, but there's actually a couple of workers here installing the screens, and our new Hydro-Dyne screens are just barely taller than they are. So we greatly reduced the downstream maintenance in Tulsa, all this ragging, the rags that we're getting on the climber screens, the rags that we're getting through the climber screens, all that went away with our new Hydro-Dyne through flows in Tulsa. Third screen in our family is the Tiger Shark multi-rig screen. We like to think of this as a heavy-duty coarse screen. As I just mentioned with the climber only has one rake. The Tiger Shark has multi-rakes. About every 4 feet, every 48 inches, we have a rake going around to clear the static bar rack. What's a little bit unique about the Tiger Shark as compared to the other sharks? One big thing is it's a dry offload screen. We've got an ultra-high molecular weight an ultra-high molecular weight wiper blade that's wiping the material off the rakes of the screen. So we don't need any wash water to operate a Tiger Shark screen. Again, it's ideal for the largest particles. Center flow is the smallest objects. Bull Shark is somewhere in between. The Tiger Shark with the wide, deep rakes are going to remove the largest particles. Having said that, we still have some of these family of design features, such as the sealing system of the guide links that allows for no ragging. There's no chains, again, no chains like we have on some other multi-rigs out there that are gonna cause downstream maintenance problems like we saw in Tulsa. Again, like kind of similar to a through flow screen, you're gonna have the discharge on the back side of the screen. So again, a little bit different than the center flow with its flexibility, but similar in the regard that there's nothing submerged in the channel for ragging or for maintenance. Tiger Shark applications, again, we're sticking to this theme of being a coarse screen. We'd be happy to install a Tiger Shark in the Headworks at your project, but we just think you can do a little better when it comes to capture with the center flow or the through flow screens. So for some reason, when I get to this slide, I practiced this a couple times, believe it or not. I get to this slide and I'm reminded that not only are we made in the USA, but we are a custom manufacturer. Every piece of equipment we make is custom to optimize each and every application. So how are we custom? What are we doing? One size does not fit all. So that applies to a couple parameters here. One is the grid opening size. We can go as small as a 0.5 millimeter. We can go all the way up to 300 millimeters. I think at some point you reach a point where you're no longer screening anymore and you've defeated the purpose. So let's say a 0.5 millimeter up to maybe 1 inch would be a nice opening size for Hydro-Dyne. Flow ranges, pretty much any flow. We can go down to 100,000 gallons per day or less. Our largest screen thus far for capture or for hydraulics is 160 million gallons per day for one screen. Screen widths, as I said, the Bull Shark through flow can go as narrow as 11 inches. The center flow, we need at least 30 inches, and we can go all the way up to 120 inches or more for our screen width. Screen height as short as 5 feet, so far as tall as 60 feet or higher. So pretty much unlimited when it comes to our customization. Definitely one size does not fit all. Continuing on with the customization, the best fit for the screening grid, regardless of the application. So I'm glad we got to this slide. Let's talk about the laced link grid. The laced link is very proprietary to Hydro-Dyne. There's others out there that do something a little similar, but at Hydro-Dyne, we use this very strong, robust laced link grid. We take sometimes thousands of these links on one screen, and we lace the whole screen on its side to come up with our laced link grid. So do you remember earlier when I mentioned that the bull shark can be a fine screen or a coarse screen? All we have to do is just modify the spacing between the links. We can go down to as narrow as 3 millimeters. That's probably a little big there, but we can go as small as a 3 millimeter spacing for the lace link grid. And all we have to do to make a larger grid, say a 6 millimeter or a 9 millimeter, is just put wider spacers in there to come up with that size grid. So for the laced link grid, we can go with the center flow or the through flow on the laced link grid. Typically, we like to stick to the laced link grid on the through flow. From there, you get into a little bit higher capture applications, right? We're going to go with the smaller opening. The first one is the perforated panel for ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene. So this is probably about a 6 millimeter hole. So say 6, 4, even maybe 3 millimeter opening size, we like to go with this ultra-high molecular weight material. This is going to be a bad example, believe it or not. When you get into a smaller grid, a smaller opening size, we like to go with the stainless steel plate. This is a bad example, if you will, because the holes here are too large. These look to me like 6 millimeter holes on a stainless steel plate, which can cause hairpinning. Hairs want to staple and wrap around the holes. That's because the thickness of the grid is too thin, actually. So the ultra-high molecular weight perf panel is a thicker material, almost no hairpinning on a 6 millimeter hole, whereas we get that if we did a 6 millimeter stainless steel plate. So we won't do that. What we will do for stainless steel is a 2 millimeter hole. So this is basically your plate for MBR applications, is a 2 millimeter stainless steel perforated plate. From there, we have the stainless steel wire mesh, which is typically for water applications, not typically wastewater, although that can be a downstream polishing screen in a wastewater plant. While we're on this, hopefully you guys can see this. There's a nice photo of a tray right there. So whether it's wire mesh or it's one of our other perforated options, we like to add trays for just a different type of capture for our center flow screens with this grid. So continuing on quickly with our theme of optimization, we start with the screens naturally. We move to the screenings handling. A lot of options there, a lot of customization we can do. We basically have 3 options. There's the white tip shark washing compactor, there's the spinner shark conveyor, and then there's the launder sluice that we already looked at with Canton. Generally speaking, the most common application is the washing compactor, the most common system, if you will. I want to quickly go through what the differences are since I have your attention. It basically boils down to something as simple as how far away is the dumpster? How far is the dumpster from the channel? If the dumpster is close to the channel, then it's simply a screen, a compactor right into the dumpster. And we can do that for a pretty good distance, 10, 15, even 20 feet with that kind of configuration. If the dumpster is farther away than that, then we can go screen, compactor, conveyor. So we kind of dry and dewater the screenings a little bit and put them in the conveyor. And then the conveyor takes the screenings off to the dumpster. Last option, which quite frankly we prefer, is screenings into a sluice. So you've got wet screenings into the sluice. We let the sluice, which doesn't have an auger inside it, it's just basically a great big gutter, if you will, a very well-made rigid gutter. So we go screen into the sluice, let the sluice take the screenings that distance to a compactor that's close to the dumpster. So that's some of our many options we can do for screenings handling. Sand Shark Grit Removal System, another great product in our portfolio. What we typically stick to is a 270 vortex grit removal system. 270 is the most common. Sometimes we do 360, so either one. What you get with the vortex grit removal is high efficiency and very low head loss. Being a custom manufacturer, we can even do the grit trap as an above grade stainless steel tank that we make in-house. So lots of options for grit. There's a lot of old concrete grit systems out there. We can easily retrofit into those systems, whether it's a slope bottom or a flat bottom, all kinds of different options for grit. So you can see we're basically a one-stop shop when it comes to your Headworks equipment. This is the Dusky Shark septage receiving station. Simply, it is a screen in a tank. We like to start with the Bull Shark. Again, more of a coarse, more of a tough screen, if you will, although all of our screens are tough. But because of the larger solids, we start with a Bull Shark recommendation for the SRS system. Here's a better example of it in use. We can do a center flow inside of the tank instead of a Bull Shark. And also, you don't have to do this, a screen in a tank, at a septage receiving station. It can just basically be a small packaged Headworks plant where you don't have a concrete channel, and we basically just run the influent and the effluent pipes in and out of the tank. Hammerhead on-site screen sizing, HOS for short. This is a proprietary technology that we have. It's basically a portable system that we ship to the wastewater treatment plants that basically early in the project design helps us optimize what screen choices to use. Excuse me. A good example of when to use the HOS, maybe an ideal example, is for the dual stage screening, such as Canton, Ohio. How do we kind of dial in on what the proper coarse screen opening is and fine screen opening behind it? Great system we have. We'd love for you to contact us about HOS. Controls. With every piece of equipment we sell, we provide a controls package with it. At the very least, you've got the main control panel like we show here. It can be as simple as this with a local control station, and it can get very complex. We can add the PLC to the system. We can add VFDs. We also have the ultrasonic levels that I mentioned earlier to turn the screens on and off. Last but not least, service. Our service department is fully staffed. They're right outside the conference room from us now. Great team to meet all your service needs. We have 2 in-house traveling, if you will. That's a contradiction, but they're either in-house or traveling, highly experienced field service technicians that allows for fast turns on new screen commissioning, for service, for replacement parts. As you can see here, Richard is doing an O&M service contract where we can come out to the plant once or twice a year to do a visual and a routine service on your screens. Incidentally, this is a pretty good picture of the fact of how accessible our screens are. That's actually a pretty large center flow that he's working on, and you can see that everything's very operator friendly right there at the user level for Richard. Okay, so let's summarize some ways that Hydro-Dyne can optimize your Headworks design. We've already talked about it, right? We are a custom design and engineer manufacturer. We have many different screen options, as you just saw, many different grid options to optimize your particular design. High performance, low maintenance. We got the screenings handling, a lot of different options there, likewise with grit. So when you go back to the slide that I kind of kicked us off with, I just want you to take away from this, made in the USA to optimize your Headworks performance, high capture, high quality, and excellent service and reliability. As I said, we'd love for you to contact us. We'd love for you to join us for the rest of our live webinar series this week. We'd also like for you to complete the survey that you should be getting. Our schedule for this week's sessions are at live.hydrodyne.com. If you have any projects, we'd definitely love to hear from you. You can email us info@hydrodyne.com, go to our website, or call us as well. So that's that. But now I've got my trusty assistant, Randy Dow, our sales director here at Hydro-Dyne. You'll hear from him later this week. He's been reviewing all your questions. First, Randy, I would like to ask if anyone has asked about the 6 decades that we've been making screens.
No, but I actually figured it out.
Okay.
We did have someone ask about the shirts that you turned into Goodwill.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they'd like to know which Goodwill you turned it into. They'd like to buy it.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a while ago. Contact me for more details on that. I think I could refer some better golf shirts to you than that one.
All right.
Thank you.
So what size motors do your screens typically?
Wait. The decades.
Oh, well, we built screens in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s.
Very good. Very good. Correct. That is correct. He's redeemed himself. He thought it was 4 decades and now it's 6. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
What size motors do your screens typically require?
Good question. We like to actually go with a little bit smaller motors. We don't need to have big, beefy motors because the screens run so smoothly. So most screens are typically starting at a 1/2 horsepower. That's 0.5 horsepower, although most screens are 3/4 horsepower. Our washing compactors, a little more torque, a little more power required, 1.5 horsepower, 3 horsepower, 5. So somewhere in that range.
Next question is, do you use a rotating brush for offloading debris?
We do not use a brush. We have the spray bar system for the great white center flow, the bull shark through flow. The tiger shark uses the dry offload, but we kind of argue against a brush, if you will. It's messy. It's not the best system. Our systems do use water, but we're eliminating a motor for the brush, and we're also eliminating the brush itself. So we're not big fans of the brush system in Hydro-Dyne.
Next question is, how many employees do you have?
I like to say that we're a fairly large, small company, and we have around 80 employees. We're growing all the time.
All right, next question is, many companies claim made in the USA by assembling parts that are made overseas. Is that what Hydro-Dyne does?
I'm familiar with that. Being a golfer, that's what a lot of golf club companies do. They have the parts made overseas, and maybe they'll assemble the clubs in the US, but that's not what Hydro-Dyne does. Everything we do is under one roof. I kind of showed it earlier. All these things are made in-house. Our perforated panels, we have a CNC router to actually drill the holes in these panels. Same machine actually makes the guide links in-house, so we are we are made and assembled in-house. That's a good question.
All right, so you mentioned the multi-rake screen and the Headworks. You've also mentioned the bull shark screen. Your presentation leaned towards advising to use the bull shark versus the multi-rake. Why is that?
In a word, capture. You can get much better capture with the bull shark than you can a multi-rake, whether it's Hydro-Dyne's multi-rake or someone else's. We have another presentation where we like to estimate that a bull shark can capture roughly double, twice as good of capture than a multi-rake. Another thing, if I could go back to the slide, our continuous belt avoids jamming. A multi-rake inherently is going to jam because the rakes come around and can get binded up into the bar rack itself. You can't do that with a bull shark. It's going in the opposite direction. It's a continuous belt. So you have higher capture and higher reliability with a bull shark versus a multi-rake.
We've got one question talks about maintenance. So what kind of annual maintenance, regular maintenance can we expect with your screens?
I like to say that it's low maintenance for sure. And what I like to say is a lot of visual stuff. We have an O&M schedule of things we're wanting the operators to look at on a weekly, a monthly, and annual basis. There's some grease fittings up in the top. As I mentioned, everything's above channel. So we have some grease fittings on the gearbox. We want you to check stuff like the auger and the brush in the compactor because the compactor gets a lot of wear. We also have the spray nozzles for the spray bars. So that's just an example of some of the stuff we look at. Over time, one thing that does wear out is the lower track. And we've designed our screens that 15 or 20 years from now, we can easily switch out the lower track when it wears out for a new lower track.
So we have a follow-up question about percent capture. What is the percent capture for each family of screens?
Well, the center flow screen with the 6mm grid was certified at 84% in England. The center flow with the 2mm grid was certified at over 93%. From there, we estimate a little bit because the center flow is the one screen that went to Europe. We like to say that the laced link grid can get up to into the 70s on capture itself. Again, the laced link grid can go as small as a 3mm opening. So arguably a 3mm laced link grid can have as good a capture as a 6mm perf panel grid.
Yeah, just a follow up to that, Neil, the average for a 6mm multi-rake was 35% from the upwear testing, and the average for a 6mm through flow screen is about 70%.
Right. So the center flow and the through flows are getting basically twice the capture as the multi-rake.
Just a couple more questions. So how do we choose the right grid for our screen? You mentioned several different types of grids. How do we choose the right one?
The answer is it depends. Oh, just kidding. It depends on a lot of things. That was not good. That wasn't that funny. Depends on a lot of things. Sometimes there's no perfect answer to that question. What we like to hear, and as you know, Randy, we like to know what the influent characteristics are at your plant. Good example, we're in Florida. Everything's flat. Everything's pumped flow here. All the solids are getting broken up before they reach the plant. So in Florida, we have a lot of center flow screens with a 6mm perforated panel. You go a little further north, you go a lot further north actually into my territory, upstate New York. Not the best idea to do a center flow with a 6mm panel. Up there, we sell a lot of bull shark screens with a little bit larger opening, like a 6mm laced link. Another thing, as I mentioned, is the Haas kit. We can actually send our portable kit to the plant and be able to dial in exactly what type of grid that we want to use.
We have an attendee that asked a question via the chat feature. His question is, what are the wash water requirements for the screen as far as gallons per minute and PSI?
Good question. Wash water is typically in the range of 10 to 20 to 30 gallons per minute. It could be a little larger on larger screens, but more or less 20 gallons per minute, which includes the compactor. We like for these larger openings, say 6mm or larger, to have 40 PSI. When we get in, again, back to these smaller grids, we like at least 60 PSI for the water pressure. The water usage I just mentioned, however, is only when the screens are running. If you remember me talking about the screen kind of goes on and off, we're only using the spray water when the screen is running and removing the screenings from the grid. That's a good question.
I have another question on the Q&A section. So you mentioned the lower sections replaced after 15 to 20 years. Is that on all screens or on those screens that are operating in a high grit load environment?
I'd say there's truth to that. Probably when there's more friction, there's more stuff down in there with the grit that you probably see that more in those type of environments. Part of what I was trying to say is that we've learned over the years with our continuous improvement that that's kind of a tough piece to cut out of there. So over time we decided let's just install that up front in more of a bolt-in, bolt-out type of thing to replace that lower track.
Talked about choosing the right grid for our screen. How do we go about choosing the right screen for our project?
Well, again, it kind of relates back to the last question. It's not exactly a perfect science. In sales, I try to listen to the customer. I don't try to, I do listen to the customer. That's good advice. And I think, Brent, you're on the call from Tennessee. When we were up in Tullahoma, they told us they wanted a clean Headworks. They wanted high capture. That was their first priority. So Tullahoma, Tennessee now has 2 center flows with the 6mm perf panel grid. So we're listening to the customer. If they're more of a plant that says that we have trouble with wipes, we have trouble with ragging, larger objects, maybe we lean toward the bull shark and a 6mm laced link grid versus a perf panel grid. In general, we typically start with a 6mm 1/4 inch opening grid. We just think that's a good in-between grid to start with if we don't know otherwise.
So Neil, we do have some additional questions, but we've run out of time. Anyone that has submitted a question that we weren't able to respond to, we will respond to you via email or contact you.
Thank you. So again, we'd like to just thank everybody for sticking in here. We had a lot of questions. They were great questions. We want to thank you for joining us today. We hope that you join us for our other sessions. Go to live.hydrodyne.com and feel free to contact us however you want. We really appreciate it. Thanks so much for joining us.